I wanted to just start with looking back on how far we've come. I've been working on this issue for about 17 years. So in the early 2000s, when I was thinking, I've got to do something about this climate issue, it was very much couched as a moral issue, a future issue. And most of the solutions were in their relative infancy in terms of their rollout. So there was a few thousand homes with solar panels. Now there's millions of homes. The accessibility of the technology, of the solutions, obviously the cost curve has just been amazing, how quickly those costs have been reduced. The commitments that have been made by governments at all levels, subnational, national levels, have been increasing over time, and it's been excellent to see our federal government step up recently to commit to 43% reduction and be serious about a range of different climate policies to actually get us there. Overseas, there's been this re-engaged United States, and national governments have been following the lead of business, of communities, of subnational governments. But of course, in that period of time, the last 17 years that I've been working on climate, we've seen the issue go from being something that was to happen to us in the future, preventing future harm, to the harm happening all around us as we speak. So more than 80% of Australians have been affected by climate-fueled disasters in the last 3 years alone. The catastrophic Black Summer fires, which I know we all remember, where there was major forest fires from Brisbane to Hobart simultaneously. Homes and communities were razed, billions of animals were obliterated, a plume of smoke went right round the world. It could be seen from space. And from the city to the bush, we were breathing smoke, toxic smoke, often for weeks. We'd wake up with the taste of ash in our mouth. Then the floods that have happened repeatedly in many locations over the last couple of years, and the personal and economic cost can't really be more stark than watching a business be flooded multiple times, full of mud, and see their stock repeatedly floating down the street. And as we look at it, that's what's changed in this environment, is both the solutions are now with us, but the issue is absolutely we're all experiencing it firsthand. This isn't about our children and grandchildren, although of course it is as well. It's about us. These solutions we need to absolutely increase the speed and the scale in which we're dealing with it. So the world is acting. Australia is beginning to act at a national level. And of course, as Dermot said, there's been so much that's happened at a state level, which has been absolutely critical to enabling the federal government to now do more. But it's nowhere near fast enough. It would have been nice if the transition happened earlier and faster, but the challenge we have right now is to escalate the speed and scale of change. We're getting dangerously close to temperature thresholds that are considered catastrophic if we cross them. Scientists in the Australian context recommend that we need to reduce our emissions 75% this decade by 2030. This decade has to be where the rubber absolutely hits the road, the lion's share of action occurs. And the consequence of Australia doing that work would be to play a positive role globally, not just because we are a large polluter globally, we're 15th largest in the world on an absolute basis, but also what is the leadership that Australia could offer at this moment? What is the role of our businesses and our industries, our governments, in sharing the solutions that we can come up with, the innovations that we can come up with a world that is desperate for those solutions right now? In the past, Australia has been a blocker at international negotiations. We've been playing a negative role internationally, but this is an opportunity to totally reinvent the way Australia is engaging globally. So the target that the current government has, 43% as a step up, must be a flaw. And then the speed and scale must be brought on very quickly to get to the 75% reduction that we need. We also need to make sure, as Dermot said as well, we can't be replicating the mistakes of the past. We need to make sure the transition, which does involve some mining, a whole range of different industrial processes, etc., is nature positive. It's culturally positive. So when we are doing something like opening lithium mines in Australia, which we will need many lithium mines if we're to meet the battery needs of the world, and Australia has 50% of the world's lithium, we need to make sure that that's done in an environmentally positive way and in a culturally positive way. I love Dermot's phrase about a regenerative revolution. So the expectation in the past that national governments would be the leaders has been shown to not be the case. We've seen the leadership from business, community, subnational governments as being the critical factors in opening up space for national governments to then do more. I think the anticipation years ago was that national governments would be braver than perhaps they have been. So my message for this room is this is the group of leaders. There's no other grown-ups that are going to be tackling the challenge. Business has a critical role in providing the leadership and innovation, both within the Australian context and overseas. And just before I wrap up, I wanted to share this slide with you that illustrates just how quickly this change needs to happen. It's somewhat easy, I suppose, to do a linear curve of how you get to a 75% reduction in emissions. So this is what is a 75% reduction. And this is the period we are in now. You could just have the straight line, which is the convenient one. But of course, curves never quite go to plan. And we've got a period where we've got, what does it look like when you layer that on with the political environment? So at the moment, we've got this 22, 23, we are in a delivery phase of a federal government that has made a range of different commitments. And our job is to make sure that those commitments are as strong as possible. And then I hope my screen is coming up. Then the next phase is to think about, well, what is the campaign before the next federal government? What are the next federal government is elected? What are the things that they could be committing to in advance of that period? So we then get another federal government in a few years' time. They then have a period of delivery. Then they campaign again, and then they deliver again. So we've got these 3, maybe 18-month to 2-year windows for federal governments to be delivering on the commitments that they've made. So for those that are trying to make a difference in this space and get us to go a lot faster, that means there needs to be a step change in thinking between each of those federal elections so that politicians that are coming to those elections and making commitments are making commitments that are far larger than they think that they can make now. So for those that are advocating for change, our job is to show that it is possible and get the community, get business, get industry clamoring for the level of step change that is required to get us to that level of reduction of 75% this decade. It's no small task, but I think that the silver lining of something like the COVID crisis over the last few years is when we can illustrate the sheer scale of the problem, communities, bring them along, people can be willing to create changes in their own lives. I think that's what that crisis shows us, but also even the revolution we've seen so far in renewable technology, just how much has been taken up so quickly. When we look ahead, it's very hard to understand how much change can happen and estimate the level of speed. So I'll leave it there and pass back to the facilitator. Thank you very much for having me.